this does bring up a good thing that I want to cover with regard to triggers and colliders, okay? Because there is a difference between them. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll take a look at the difference between colliders and triggers. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. So I'm going to run our game just so that we can move all directions, we can jump, and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Now, let me go to our player, and I'm going to open our player manager. Okay, and what we have here is we're using on collision enter to detect when we have hit the ground. So if we are jumping and the object that we hit has been tagged as ground, then we'll set is jumping to false. Okay. Now, on collision enter is a built-in function to Unity. Okay, it automatically fires when one object collides with another. Now, you need a rigid body, and that could be why yours aren't firing. You need a rigid body in order to detect that collision. Okay, so Keith, that's one thing that you might want to check out as to why it's not working. Okay, if you don't have a rigid body, it's not going to detect that collision. Now, let us look at the difference between is trigger and not. So this, we click on our player and we've got is trigger. Essentially, the difference between the two is you want to use a trigger when you don't want physics to impact the collision. Okay, and so if we select is trigger, we can still register when one object collides with another, but there's not going to be any physics involved with that trigger or with that collision. So for example, if we in our game, if we had a situation where we've got a player walking and when they get to a certain area, we wanted something to happen. Okay, maybe we've got like a what is the anybody played Death Squared on the Switch? No, nobody's played it. Okay, it's I think it's some indie game. It's a 2-player puzzle game. My wife and I play it. The object of the game is you each control a robot, and it's a puzzle game. You've got to move. Red's got to move to the red square, blue's got to move to the blue square, but you have to work together and you can kill each other on accident and stuff like that. And so anyways, the way the game detects when the red player has moved to the red square and the blue player has been moved to the blue square is a trigger. And again, the difference between a trigger and a collider or a collision is a trigger is going to notify of collision, but a collision will actually use physics and push away as a part of the colliders. Let me show an example. So let's run this and let me unmaximize. I'm going to click is trigger, and as soon as I do that, the player falls through the world. Okay, it's clearly not what we want. And the reason the player fell through the world is when you select is trigger, we no longer are going to utilize physics with regard to the collisions. And so if we put let me do this here. I'm going to put let's create a sphere. Okay, and I'm going to move the sphere right over here. Okay. And I'm going to make the sphere bigger. Let's do 5. So it's halfway. I guess we should do We'll do 0. Okay. Now, right now, the sphere has a collider on it. And so if I run this, the ball goes up and over the sphere. Okay, see how that works? Whee. If I take this sphere and do is trigger, now our ball goes right through it. Okay, now here's the difference. Situations where you want to use is trigger and situations where you don't. Whenever you want physics to control the interaction between two objects, meaning if I don't want the player to go through our sphere, then we don't want to use is trigger. We want to let it be as is. Again, if I take that off and I try to move, now we get physics dictating the interaction between those two objects. Okay. If I put is trigger, no physics is going to be involved. I simply move right through it. Okay. So if I have, let's say we have a goal area that our player is trying to get to. Okay. And this is it. So we'll call this goal area. Excuse me. Let's do this. We'll call goal area material. And click on this, and then we'll go goal area material. And let's make this a light green, greenish yellow. And then let's take the transparency down. We have to change this to transparent. Okay. So now we've got this sweet looking area that we're trying to get to. Okay. And we can move inside of it. Okay, so maybe this is like a healing area that we have to run to. I don't know. But what we want to do is, if we had on collision enter, it would roll up and over, which is not what we want. We want to be able to move into this. And so that's where we would use is trigger. So on the goal area, we have is trigger selected. And now let's take a look at our code for this. So this on collision enter only fires on objects that have physics dictating the interaction. And so here, if I say hit object collision dot game object dot name, okay, so it's going to print out whenever our player hits an object. Okay, so game started and it said we hit the ground, which makes sense because we just started. Okay, now notice I got no notification over here. If I change that goal area and take is trigger off and run it, it says we hit the ground. Bang, now we hit the goal area. Okay, so see it telling us the objects that it's hitting. Does this make sense? Are we good on this? Okay, so the question is, well, how do I detect if I hit an object when is trigger? And that's where we say private void on trigger enter. Keith, were you using on trigger enter or on trigger enter 2D?
Let me double check this one. Yeah, it was the 2D version.
Okay, that's the right. Well, if you're using a 2D collider, you need the 2D version. So
okay, I'll just change it. So I'll switch it to this version in front of me.
Yeah, that won't fix it, but when you switch it over to 3D, you'll need to use the regular on trigger enter. Okay, so this is going to give us what we want. Okay, so here I'm going to say print trigger other dot name. Okay, actually that's going to give us other dot game object dot name. So now when we run this, I forgot to set it back to this trigger.
Does on the on trigger, like enter, when it says enter on the end, does that mean it's just like running that one time for when the collision or the trigger starts, not constantly because it's constantly colliding with it?
Yes, if you wanted constant, you would use private void on trigger stay. There's also on trigger exit, which is when you leave. That's the difference. Okay, each are useful in their own situation. Okay, so now bang, see, we saw the trigger goal area, which is what we want. Okay, questions on this? Fantastic. Now let's get to what we were going to get to, which is GUI stuff.
I do have a question about the top-down view for 3D Pulpit games. When we do activate the sphere variant, does the perception change, or do we have to do that on ourselves?
When you activate the what?
The sphere object for the object to collide with, do we have to change the perspective to make it more top-down, or does it flip automatically?
You'll have to change the camera. So like we have a camera, and the direction the camera is pointing is going to determine what you see. So if you look down here, this is what we see. If I take the camera and I rotate it, that changes the perspective that we see. So that's all you need to do. You can, I don't care what perspective you use. You can even use like straight 90 degrees down if you want, or you can shift the camera forward. It doesn't affect how you're going to code the moving of the notes or the arrows or that sort of thing. It only controls the perspective that the user sees it from.
Got you. Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's get to some GUI stuff, because that's what we talked about last class that we wanted to get into. So here's how we do this. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say, go to UI, and then we're going to create a canvas. Okay, a canvas is the parent object that all of the GUI stuff is going to go under. Okay, you need a separate canvas for each different type of display that you want. Last time we talked about 2D screen space, which is the overlay. We talked about world space. So if you have multiple ones of those, like in Access Football, do I have it pulled up? Yeah, there are multiple. Hold on, I'm in the middle of editing something. We have, this is the 2D screen space, and then I have a world space that's a separate one, and then I have a no scale, which is different. You need separate canvases for all of these, and everything is contained inside of it. Okay, we're just going to set up with a really basic 2D screen space overlay that we'll use for this. Okay, now when you add a canvas, it's automatically going to add an event system, and the event system automatically gets added because this is how Unity detects input on the 2D screen space. Okay, you can leave it alone by default. Okay, so canvas scaler is how the canvas actually scales with different resolutions and different aspect ratios. The one I use for Access Football is scale with screen skies, and I've got it set to basic 16:9, which is 1920 by 1080, and this is what I have for there. Okay, question from chat. So each component needs its own canvas? No. they would go on the same canvas. Those would all go into the same canvas, which we will see. Like, so for example, on Access Football, under my screen space overlay, I literally have everything. The playbooks, the pop-ups, the score clock, coin toss, everything goes under there. Yep. Okay, so you can leave it canvas. I renamed mine to main GUI. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. Now, inside of this, if you double click on an object, it'll go straight to it. When you're editing GUI stuff, it's beneficial to come up here in your scene mode and click this 2D view. That's going to snap it to a 2D view, makes it way easier to edit. So you hit that, everything snaps to 2D. So here we are looking at, we see the bounding rectangle for what we'll see on the screen space. Okay, I am going to go to the canvas scaler and go scale with screen size. And most people play 1920 by 1080. And I go to expand is what I have found works well for me. So you can use those as well. That's what's going to, it'll automatically move items and scale with the screen size. Okay, which is helpful. Okay, so let's add let's add a score. So I'm going to go UI, text, and there's two different, it looks like Text Mesh Pro is now built into Unity. Use Text Mesh Pro. It's way better than the basic text. So I'm just going to put a text box. Okay. When you do that, this pops up and it says, this appears to be the first time you're accessing Text Mesh Pro. And so, yes, you're going to need to import the essentials. Okay. Unity is automatically going to do this for you. It's way simple, and under packages, actually, no, it's going to put it here under assets. Okay. So now we have this text box that is created. Okay. Notice that because we are working in 2D space, instead of a regular transform component, we have a rect transform. It's just the 2D version of it. Okay. You can use these anchors to move stuff around. So if I want to anchor this text to the top left, I can click up there and then I can move it up to the top left. Okay. And then I can move it as I want with the X and the Y values here. Okay. So I'm going to put it 50 in and 50 down, and we're going to say this is our score. Okay, we can use these to kind of move that. And then I'm going to say score title. And then I'm also going to add a second one called score value. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I am going to take this score value and move it over so that it lines up right next to this. And then I'm going to put some numbers just so that we can see how it displays. If I go to the game scene, you can see exactly now that it's showing up at the top left of our screen, which is exactly where we run it. Okay. Now, we've got score title and score value. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this score value and I'm going to child it to score title, because if I wanted to move this, they're separate, and that's no good. Okay. So I'm going to click and drag this score value and drop it into score title. So now it's a child of it. So if I take the score title, I can now move the whole thing as one unit. Okay. Good so far. All right. Now on our main GUI, I'm going to add a component and we're going to create a new script. Okay, I'm going to call this GUI manager. Okay. Take GUI manager and we are going to drag and drop this into our scripts folder. I don't know why that pops up over and over again. Okay, so now we have GUI manager right here. So inside of GUI manager, we are going to get rid of all that. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up our GUI manager as a singleton. And the reason we want to set this up as a singleton is so that we can access this class from any script inside of our code or inside of our project. And so when the player does something, we can access all of the components in our GUI manager to do stuff there. So let's set this up as a singleton. This is a review. We've done this before, so I'm gonna go a little quick. So we'll say public static GUI manager instance. Okay, so we have a public static reference to the GUI manager class. And then we'll say private void awake. So on awake, when this first loads, we're going to say if instance equals null. So if we haven't created the singleton yet, then we'll say this is our singleton. Okay. And if we have already created this, we'll say don't destroy on road game object. Okay. Now, sorry, wrong button. This goes here. If we have already created, we want to destroy the game object. I said that wrong. Okay. That's it. That's a singleton code. Any questions on that? Okie dokie. So that's going to create our singleton. And what we want to do is now we want to get a reference to this score so that we can change it in code. All right. So we are going to, first thing we have to do is, because we are using TextMesh Pro, we have to import it. Okay. So this is just like when we're coding in Java and you have to import, scanner or whatever it is. If we are using TextMesh Pro, like we need to put using TM Pro. And I strongly suggest you use TextMesh Pro as opposed to the basic text, because it's way better. All right, so now that we're using TextMesh Pro, we're gonna go serialized field, private, TextMesh Pro GUI. This is getting access to this component right here, this TextMesh Pro component. Okay, sorry, wrong button. And then this, we're going to call this score txt. I have gotten in the habit of just affixing the type to the end. I know that is, some people like it, some people don't. I do it because I have found in what I do, I often reference different components of the same object. And so sometimes I might need to access the actual game object. I want to shut off the whole thing. Sometimes I want to get access to just the text. And so a lot of times will affix the type to the end. So I know whether I'm talking about the text field of the score or the game object of the score or a different component of the score. It's not necessary. It's just something that I have done. Some people don't like that. I don't care. You code however you want to code, but this is what I do. Okay. So this gives us access to that text field that we just created. All right. So when we first start, a private void start, and you can do this inside of awake. It doesn't really matter. We're going to say score text.text equals 0. And Unity is not going to like that. All right. They're not going to like us putting 0 here. And the reason is because text is a string. Okay. And so you could just put this inside of quotes. Wait, let's do. That is fine. Okay. So we come back to our project. And if we were to run this now, we would get a null reference exception. We would get an unassigned reference, and that's what we're going to do. And we do it right here, we get a null reference exception. And the reason we got a null reference exception is because it tries to run this code and it says, I have no idea what this is. You haven't told me what this is. And we haven't told what it is because we have to click on main GUI, and then we come down here and this says none. We haven't assigned it. So I'm going to click and drag and drop the value right there. So now that we've assigned what our text field actually is, and I run it, we see that the score properly gets set to 0 right when we run it. Okay. So now we can do fun stuff. Okay. So we can do a private int score equals 0, or we can just inside of start, we can say score equals 0 and then set score private or set score display. Where we say score txt.text equals score dot toString. Okay, you can just go score dot toString and that'll take the int and turn it into a string. Totally fine. Okay, so we have set to score display that we can call from here. Was that a dog? Yes, that was my dog. He's barking at, she's barking at something. Okay. And then let's create another function. And so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna region this off. And call this score and region. And so we'll put all of our score stuff, our score functions here. Increase score by int value. We'll say score plus equals value. And then we will say set score display. So every time we increase the score, or maybe we'll do change score, we will set it right here. Okay, so every time we change the score, we're going to immediately update it. So here we'll set it to 0 and call set score string. Okay. Let's run it before we do anything else, just to make sure we're still good. And score is 0, just like we want. So here is where the singleton comes into play. Now, you'll remember before that we had our bad guy, and the bad guy needed a reference to the player. So remember, we don't have bad guys turned on right now. But the idea was the bad guys needed reference to where the player was. And so if we had 5 bad guys, we would need to drag and drop that reference 5 times, which would get a little bit annoying. And as we add things to the game, if everything is keeping reference to everything else, then that's a lot of references that we have to drag and drop, which is why singletons are beneficial. Again, singletons are a double-edged sword. They make some things great, they make other things more difficult. So you just kind of have to pick and choose what you want to go with. When you're first starting out, singletons are good, and the more you use them, the more you use them, the more you understand them and kind of see situations where they're good and situations where you shouldn't use them. Okay, so in our player manager, I'm going to come down here to on trigger enter, and I'm going to say if other dot tag equals goal, then we are going to increase our score. So here's how we do that. We're going to get access to our singleton by saying GUI manager.instance, and then we're going to say change score, and we're going to change it by a value of 1. Okay. So I go and I run this, and nothing is going to happen. So we come in here and we get nothing. Why did we get nothing? No score for you.
Was the area not large enough? Oh, we haven't tagged the goal.
That is correct. We have not tagged the goal. So we'll go under the goal
Thank you, Nick.
area and we will add a tag, and we'll come down here. We've already added ground. Now we're going to add goal. Okay. So then we'll go to the goal area and say you're the goal. Now we run it and we get 1 point, 2 points. All right, this is an amazing game. Now, what if we wanted to have it to where we have like a health bar? Okay, soccer, but you are the ball. That's right. So maybe we need a separate area where that's where you go to get points. But we need a different place to go to get health. I don't know. This is a stupid game. Let's create another one of these. Move it over here. This will be a healing area. I don't know. What color should this one be? Red. Looks like unanimous. Holy
Blue.
cow. There you go. All right, so I'm going to take this goal area. I'm going to copy it. This is going to be called healing area, and we'll make this red. Okay. Then we'll go to our healing area and we'll assign the material, and now it's red. Cool. All right, so let's do the same thing. Let's tag this. We need to add a new tag, and we'll call this healing, and then tag it as healing. Okay. Now let's test it. Else if other dot tag equals healing, then I'm just going to print we are healed. Yay. Okay, it popped up, we're healed. All right, so always good to just test smaller parts just to make sure that works before we go and add the GUI stuff. Okay. So we are healed. That's fantastic. So I'm going to go back to editing our GUI. So I'm going to go back up here and we have our score. And should we put the health bar below or on the right side, top right? We need a tiebreaker. One person said below. Aiden. Oh, that hold on. I was supposed to go to 8. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Dead center, right in the middle. It'll cover up the player. All right, we're gonna get. Looks like we have the most votes for top right, so let's put it on the top right. So there's our score, and now let's add our health bar. So I'm gonna right click. So when you right click on an object, it's going to add it as a child to that object. So I right click on main GUI, and I'm gonna go to UI, and then I'm gonna go image. That's gonna add an image. And we're gonna call this health bar. And let's anchor it to the top right. And then we'll move it. Let's move it in a little bit. No, let's move it in a little bit and down a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna scroll in here a little bit, and then let's make it longer. Okay. Now the reason it's going that way is because that's where I've got it anchored. See, I've got it anchored to the top right. And so if I change the height, everything's anchored from this point right here. That's why you see like an extra circle around that circle. Okay, which we're probably going to need to change that. So we don't want, I think, how big do we want our health bar? That's way too high. 75, 400 by 75. Is that a good size health bar? Yes. Sure, I'm going with it. Okay, so health bar. So inside of our health bar, I'm actually going to create another image. Okay. So here, I'm going to change the color of this to be red. And then watch this. We're going to take this, and instead of having it as a straight pivot, we're actually going to have it stretched to fit the size of the containing image. And then I'm going to add a border of 5 all the way around. Okay, so now we've got a proper health bar with a nice border around it. Okay, so I'm going to call this health bar, and you can do this a couple different ways. If you want you can do it like this. So we'll go health bar and actually remove the component there, and I'm going to create another one inside, and this will actually be our health bar, and this will be our border. You can do it like this, where this one stretches to be the whole thing. And then whatever one is on the bottom is going to appear on top. And so I'm going to just drag and drop this one up right above it. Okay, so now we just have an empty parent object with no display, and then we have our border and we have our health bar. Okay. Now, a couple things. I've got both of these selected, and if you notice right here, there's this raycast target. What that means is if you want the object to be able to interact with the player's mouse, then you need raycast target checked. Okay, that's what's going to actually check to see if it hits the mouse. When you click, it essentially sends the raycast to check to see if that works. So we don't want our player to be able to click on the health bar, so we don't need this checked. Okay. Okay. Where is? I'm looking for something. I don't remember where it is. Hang on, bear with me a second. Why do we not have that option? Yeah, normally there's an option to do a fill on it. Oh, I've got to drag an image to it first. That's it. That's it. My mistake. Believe it or not, I've actually done this before. I know it doesn't seem like it. I was like, there should be an option there. Where is it? Okay, so here's what we can do. We can drag a white text. Oh, it's not going to like that. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to our handy dandy graphics editor, and you can use Paint for this. I'll use Paint. Show you how simple it is. And we just want like a rectangle. So we'll go, generally you want, sorry, I can't do two things at once. You want things in power by 2. So we'll go 256 by 128. It doesn't really matter. Or you can go 256 by 256. This will just give you a square. And then save it. Because we just want a white. Where is my desktop? So we'll call this white square. And then I'm going to create a new folder for delete assets, because these are different from regular textures. Regular textures are imported differently. And so all of our 2D stuff, you're going to have to do a little different. So let me show you. So I put in our white square, and up here on the texture type, instead of default, you need to come down and select sprite, 2D and UI. And that gives you some different options. Typically, you're going to want to do single for sprite mode. If it's just a single display, you can do sprite sheets and animated sprites if you're doing 2D stuff, but I haven't done a whole lot with that. And we're not doing 2D stuff in this class. And then generate MIP maps. You don't need these for 2D objects that are in screen space. MIP maps are, without getting too much into it, you know how like the farther away an object is from the camera, it'll use a lower resolution texture. And so when you generate bitmaps, it'll create different copies of the same texture in lower resolutions that'll automatically get used because it's existing in screen space. You don't need bitmaps. Okay. Then you're going to hit apply. And now we can take our health bar and drag and drop here under this source image. Okay, so again, I'm under health bar, the red one, and I'm going to drag and drop it right here. Okay, and when I do that, you see all of a sudden this stuff pops up on the bottom. So when I delete it, it goes away. When I add it, it shows up here. Okay, because this is what we're going to use to scale our health bar. And then in the image type, instead of simple, I'm going to do filled. Okay, and what this does is it's going to allow us, it gives us a box and we can fill it like this. Okay, this is a radial fill. What we want is a horizontal fill, just like this. Whoop. Pretty nice, right? And you can go fill from left to right, right to left. You can do vertical, you can do radial 90 degrees. There's lots of different effects built into it. There's even like if you just want to do 180 from the bottom, there's lots. Okay, so we're just going to do the basic classic health bar like that. Okay, so let's go back to our GUI manager script. And we have our score tech. They also are going to get reference to our image, and we'll call this health bar image. Now, it doesn't like this. It says, I have no idea what this is. And so when you're using 2D stuff, just like we had to import TextMesh Pro, when you're using built-in buttons, images, that sort of thing to Unity, you have to do using unityengine.ui. Once I import that, now all of a sudden I've got this and everybody's happy. So we have score. Now I'm going to add another region for health bar. Okay. Now, we can do this a couple different ways. The player manager can actually keep track of his own health, or that can be put here. Generally speaking, it's good to decouple those two things, okay? Meaning the player will keep track of his own health, but he will communicate his health to the GUI manager in order to update the display. Doesn't really matter how you do it, but that's generally the way that is best. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we'll say public void update health bar with our health percentage. Now, the reason I'm doing a health percentage is because the health bar fill amount is what we are going to use to set the health bar. This is a scale from 0 to 1, which is why we're doing a percentage. And so we are simply going to say health bar dot fill amount equals health percentage. Pretty easy. Okay. So we'll go back to our player manager, and now we don't need gravity and fall speed because that was when we were doing other stuff. Now I'm going to say private int health. Okay. And we'll give our player a whopping 100 health right when it starts. Good so far. Okay. So actually we should probably do current health and max health, because we need both. So we say current health and max health. So let's say max health is actually 100 and current health is actually 50. Okay, we'll just start it out like that. And then what we can do is when we enter the healing thing, we can have him heal. Okay, so when we start, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say GUI manager.instance.update health bar and pass in our health percentage. Okay. Now we could simply do current health divided by max health. Okay, that's fine. We're going to have to do this in multiple places though. Okay, and so the best thing to do is just call update health or something like that here. And update health. So every time our health updates, we can pass it onto here like this. Okay. We're going to want one of these to be a float so that we don't lose decimal places when we divide, because current health and max health are both ints. And so if you have like 70 divided by 100, those points, those decimal places are going to get lost when we pass them because they're both ints. Okay. So every time we'll probably want to do this. We'll probably say private void instead of update health. Why don't we create we'll do this like public void change health. Int. We can do it like this. Take damage. I like change health. Am I the only one that codes like this? Like you type something, you're like, no, I don't like that. And type it in, no, I don't like that. Do you guys do that too, or is it just me? Okay. We'll do like this. And so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add these summary tabs. We've talked about this before. What these summary tabs do is this is what's responsible for, like it's a little message that pops up when you call this function. And so we'll say adds the supplied value to the player's current health. Pass a negative value to deal damage to the player. And so this is a kind of just a helpful way to code. So we know that if we pass a positive value, it's going to heal the player. If we pass a negative value, it's going to deal damage to the player. And so this little message is helpful. And so we'll say current health plus equals value. Okay, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to clamp that. So if current health is less than 0, then print player is dead. Okay, and then we can clamp, or we can say if current health is greater than max health, then current health equals max health. Okay, this prevents us from overhealing or going above what it is. Okay, and then we are automatically going to update the health bar right there. So we're changing that like that. And so we can say change health, and we can just pass it in 0. We want to start off. And what this does is this is just going to force a call to the display update. Okay. So any questions on that?
I do have one question. So I noticed that for current health, you assign it to an int. Wouldn't it be better to have it as an unsigned int so it wouldn't be a negative number?
Yes, that's a good idea. Good catch. Although that's going to create problems here. Because technically, we do need it to go into negative sometimes to check to see if the player's dead. So that won't work. Good thought though. Max health could be unsigned in. Although I guess like if we get really fancy and we're creating like this big RPG and there's some sort of way to add debuffs to a character, and like maybe a debuff is lowering the player's max health. And if it's like really, maybe a player's in an area they shouldn't be and somebody casts a spell on them, like, okay, your max health is now -50. And so you have to think through all of the stupid things that players are going to do that they shouldn't do. And so better just leave it as an int in this case. But I like the way you're thinking. That's good. All right, so let's run this. And when we run this, we get a null reference exception. We get a null reference exception because we didn't assign the reference. So we'll click here and we see health bar is none. So drag and drop it there. And now we run it and we have half health. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go heal. We didn't heal. The reason we didn't heal is because all we did is said we're healed. That didn't really help us much. It's like telling a person with a broken leg, oh, I hope you feel better. It doesn't actually help at all. So let's say change health 10. I'm healed. What is the shortcut for the summary notes? 3 slashes. So comments are 2 slashes. These are 3 slashes. And so right here, when I'm typing change health, watch this. See how it pops up and it says adds the supplied value to the player's current health, pass a negative value to do damage to the player. That's where that summary comes into play. So you're like, oh, okay. We want to heal, so we pass a positive value. Is it going to work? Is it going to work? Whoop, we healed. We healed again. This is amazing. All right, so what if we change it to, instead of, it's a private void on trigger stay. We'll have it do heal by 1. So this gets called while the player is in it. Right. So that might be even cooler. So we'll get rid of the on trigger enter and we'll just have like while the player is in there, he's healing. Now, if it's healing too fast, we could do a couple different things. My general suggestion is you're better off making these floats. Okay. You're better off making them floats because that allows you better control over the values. And so what we can do here, one, this is unnecessary now. It allows us to pass in like 0.2 as values for what we want to heal, as long as you change this. Okay. Floats are like doubles if you're used to Java. And so now we can slowly heal while we're inside of the bubble. And because of our clamp, we don't have to worry about overhealing. Okay. Because we've clamped it. And then we can roll on over here and get some score.
Is in Unity, is there a clamp function or do we have to hard code it?
No, there's a clamp function. You can do it's mathf.clamp. And so you could say current health 0 to max health is what you would do. And that'll automatically clamp it. Actually, I think you need to do current health equals. I think you have to do it like that because I think this returns the value. Yeah. This is how you do it.
What does that take more like? Would that be less efficient than coding it ourselves or about the same?
Generally, the way I do it is if I know I only need to clamp on one end, then I'll do it myself. Like, and here I'm just clamping on the high end. But
and 0, you die. So
right. And yeah, and that's exactly why. If I wanted to make sure the value didn't get like if I needed to keep it within a certain range, then I would use both.
Good.
That's my general thing. Yep. Okay. Let's stop there for today. I think that's a good stopping point. What we can do next time is we can kind of turn the enemies on and make a little game out of it. So maybe when the enemies hit you, you lose health. And you can go and heal, or you can go and try to rack up points, and you go until the enemies kill you or knock you off or something like that. Okay. Save this. And all right, questions for me. Sweet. All right. let me shut off my screen. And